Good morning, folks, and thanks very much for joining us here for the SenseHub Poultry presentation. My name is Nick Muntz. I'm the commercial lead for SenseHub Poultry, and my colleague Michael McCreech is our insights lead. And we'll be giving you a short presentation today on enhancing broiler welfare and performance through real-time monitoring. So I'll kick off and describe the technology, and then my colleague Michael will go into the insights down the line. At the outset, I would just like to make the point that MSD are very well known as a vaccine company and supplier to the poultry and the pig industry and across all livestock. But since 2019, we've gotten very much into the technology space across all livestock species, and SenseHub Poultry is our offering in the poultry sector. So what exactly is SenseHub Poultry? It is a wireless retrofit monitoring solution that then enables us to provide performance insights and consultancy to improve broiler outcomes. So essentially, we've got a range of monitors that we deploy on the farm, which collects the data automatically. That then feeds a user interface, the software, and backed up by data analytics and consultancy, where we work in partnership with our customers then to improve their outcomes. It's important to make the point that we do not control controller systems. We are complementary to them, and we very much rely on working in partnership with customers to make physical changes to improve their performance. So what problem are we solving? You have to solve a problem with your solution. Essentially, when you look at the landscape of the broiler industry, you've got a lot of large farms with pressures on labour. You've got a very well, if you like, preventative medicine approached industry. If you can vaccinate for it, you do. And there's an enormous pressure on a reduction in use of antibiotics. So there's a lot of efficiencies that are being lost in terms of environmental management of the birds. And below is a quote from Daniel Parker, a very well-known UK-based veterinarian, saying 85% of the problems they see with broiler production are associated with the environmental management of the birds. Well, in order to manage that environment better, you need to truly understand what's going on there. So how do we do it? We collect real-time data, which is fundamental to bird health, across this following range of parameters. So temperature, humidity, CO2, lux, both in terms of intensity and duration, air pressure, although that's more from an R&D perspective, water consumption, and weight. At this point, I see people most often saying, so what? We already have that information anyway. And you do to a degree, but what we do in SenseHub Poultry is we deploy our devices at a granular level, so we're giving you much more of that information than you've probably ever seen before in terms of a broiler production. I'll now go on to describe some of the devices that we use to collect that information, and key to that is the gateway, and that's what our monitoring devices communicate with. So they send the signal to the gateway then sends the information up to the cloud, and you can access it from the software. It's quick and easy to install on the side of a poultry house, and you connect it with an Ethernet cable or a SIM card, and it sends the information to us. Generally one gateway per farm. When it comes to the actual devices themselves, we have a little one that we call the Sense Node, which records temperature and humidity. It's transmitting the data regularly every 15 minutes or so, and it has a battery life of over 3 years. We just clip them onto the feeder lines in the broiler house so that they're actually giving you the temperature and humidity that the birds are experiencing at bird level. They're left in the poultry house between crops, and we employ them at a rate of 1 Sense Node per 1,000 birds. The bigger one then is the Sense Node Plus, so it does your temperature and humidity, but also CO2, lux in terms of intensity, duration, and the atmospheric pressure. 15 minutes again in terms of the transmission of data, and the feeder lines is common as well. It's got a battery life of around 90 days, so essentially you take it out between crops and recharge it. And we put one of those in per 10,000 birds, typically. The WaySense is a floor-mounted weigh platform, so which you can have anywhere within the house, which is sending information every 10 minutes. Not just in terms of weights, but actually in terms of the number of jumps that the birds make on the platform, so it's a measure of activity as well. And that's important when we come to the analytics and insights, and Michael will touch on that a little bit later. Again, you recharge it between crops, and we put them in at 1 per 10K birds too. The water meter is a really nice little bit of kit because it's enabled to measure water flow at very low levels. We've seen it down to 2 litres per hour, and that means during that key brooding period when the chicks are just in the house, we are getting accurate information as to water consumption. It's got a very long battery life, so we've no issues on that front. We can place them just one per house, or you can place them on every single drinking line and get some really granular information with respect to what's going on. So this little slide then depicts what a sense-hub poultry house looks like. We essentially divide the house into units of around 5,000 birds and deploy our devices as I've just described. They then communicate with the cloud, and the farmer or manager can access that information on his laptop, on an iPad, or on a phone via a web-based application. And in reality, what we're looking at doing is transforming from a traditional house approach where you've got a low number of sensors, in many cases just 3 or so in a house, sometimes not at bird level but higher, so they're not actually reflecting what the bird's experiencing. Lots of manual data integration with across few parameters, and very much reliant on, if you like, the skills of the stock person. To a sense-hub poultry enabled house where you've got full house coverage by zone with automated data integration across all the parameters I've just described. And we accompany that with tools for easy analysis and a team of data analysts and consultants to actually work in partnership with our customers to give you guidance as to how to optimize performance. So it really is a transformational system. And I'll now hand over to Michael, who will describe in more detail the software and the insights that we provide.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everyone. As Nick detailed there, the hardware side of things, I'm just going to give you an overview from the software perspective, how we actually visualize the data, and then a little bit on insights as well. In terms of our software, so as Nick said there already, a typical broiler shed, 40,000 birds in it. To put it in perspective, 30,000 birds, we have upwards of 30 to 40 sensors reporting information every 10 to 15 minutes throughout the life of a flock. So there's a lot of information to display. So doing that in a way that's easy to access and understandable is key as such. So I'll give you a quick overview of what the software looks like, and we'll just move on and give you some examples of some of the insights we've seen and learned so far. This slide here just depicts actually just some of the dashboard and the software that we have, and it really, you can see some of the graphs, and we'll go into a little bit more detail, but essentially the information that comes from the sensors, it goes up into the cloud as Nick explained, and onto our platform. The platform itself, it's a URL, so it can be accessed anywhere with internet access, and each customer has a username and password. So tablet, phone, iPad, laptop, it can be accessed for any of those facilities as such. In terms of heat maps, and our heat map is really one of the probably most used aspects of our software package, and in particular for the growers on the ground to actually understand in detail what's happening at any given time. So this is just an example. You can see when we put the sensors in the shed, every single dot here represents actually on a sensor. And on this picture here, I'm looking at temperature. So what actually transpires when you actually hit play on this, it gives you a time lapse of every 15 minutes what has happened in terms of in that shed on that given date. And in terms of the data, you can actually go back to any date and time, and we can create this type of picture in terms of temperature and humidity along with CO2 to see exactly what's happening. This is an example of a pretty good picture. You'll see target here is 28 degrees, and you'll see the color coding to the right, where 28 sat, it's roughly around the sort of green bluish color. If it's too hot, it'll appear red, and obviously if it's too cold, it's more the blue section. So this is just an example of a pretty decent picture. This is an example of where it's actually too hot in a broiler shed. So instead of purely just looking at a graph versus target, you're actually visualizing the shed locations where the temperature is, where it's hot, where it's cold, etc., etc. This is an example of where you've got a temperature variation in the shed going from very cold at one end to very hot at the other end. And this is an example, obviously, of a shed where it's too cold. Target temperature of 25, and here it's probably 20 degrees, which is not what you want. In terms of graphing, so the heat maps display sort of the granular information every 15 minutes, whereas our graphs on a platform, really, we're looking at daily averaged information. So, and normally we'll plot it versus whatever targets our growers or producers have. The top graph, you can see all the parameters along the top that we can graph. And on top of graphing these next to target, making it really visual to understand what's happening, we can add more than one parameter at any point in time. So you'll see in the bottom left here, we have humidity versus CO2, so we can plot the two of those together, understand what's happening with the humidity and the CO2. On the bottom right, we've got our weight gain versus water intake, and it's a particularly interesting graph because you can really see how the pattern of both those lanes actually follow one another, and how key water intake and what impact it has on weight gain. But at the same time, what's actually happening in terms of our temperature, humidity and CO2, and how are they impacting those outputs in terms of weight gain. The graph consequently on the top, you'll see this is an example of really how fine-tuned some of our customers can get with their actual target temperature, and they're really following that line throughout. That's just a quick overview of some of the graphs and how we present the data that flows into the platform. On top of that, once you come to the end of every flock, we have a facility on our platform that creates a more detailed end of crop report. So on top of our heat maps and your daily average information, we also have the ability to create a more detailed report, which will give you all the key elements of what or events that happened throughout the previous crop, but also will point out what went wrong and corrective actions for the next flock. So a comprehensive report as such once you come to the end of that. I picked this example out here because and I promise I'll move on from temperature in a moment, but just to focus just on this one element in terms of insights. So this is a shed, and this is a different type of heat map on the left here, where we're looking at actual average temperature throughout the life of the flock from target. So 0 being target throughout the life of the flock, or distance from target as such. And you'll see most of this shed throughout the life of this flock actually was bang on target. It's a nice green colour there. Whereas down in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got a blue and purple area, which was cold. And you can see from the gauge on the right of the heat map, it was between 4 and 6 degrees below target consistently throughout the crop. And on the right, you'll see the graph to depict that. So you'll see the line going from top left to bottom right, which is our band as such as our target. And inside that target is our actual hourly average temperature. And if you were purely just looking at the average temperature, you'd say this crop actually it was really good control. But when you actually look at the range of temperatures for this crop, it's shocking. You can see at day of placement here, we had temperatures as low as 20 degrees, which is 10-12 degrees out of spec of where it's at. And so averages are great, but they can be dangerous too when you're not looking at the full picture and looking at the detail. And this is just a good example to take in terms of insights.
But that completes our presentation here today, and I'm very happy to take any questions from the audience at this stage. Also happy not to have to answer any as well. There's a microphone there, Justin, that you can make a comment on that. Yeah.
I was just going to say, oh gosh, the importance of the relationship between what you do as the sort of data analyzer and the farm manager and the farm owner, if you see what I mean, how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is very much a partnership. Sensub Poultry is not something that you have done to you. We very much look at the performance of the birds throughout a crop cycle. get the information back from the processing plant, understand the information that you get in terms of chick placing too, and do a deep dive analysis of what's going on there. It's then about working in partnership with your customer to understand, okay, this was suboptimal, these are changes that we need to make. And then, if you like, implementing those changes for subsequent crops. So from that perspective, it's very much a change management process, and we're asking farm managers and indeed business managers to look at data in a different way from perhaps what they have done in the past, or rather than that, providing them with a lot more information to make better informed choices than they've been able to do in the past. And after that, the software becomes, if you like, a compliance tool in that you're able to see on a daily basis and a real-time basis the changes that you've implemented, and actually that they are being if you like, complied to by your teams. And it's really an empowerment tool. That's what we think of Sense on Poultry. We're empowering farm managers to do their job better, to be able to see in real time what's going on from that perspective, and to optimize the outcome for the birds and for their production. And we think down the line that will have implications in terms of attracting people to the industry, because it is de facto on the technology side more interesting, and indeed retaining people. But there's also going to be a transition in there as well. You'll have some early adopters and some champions, and it's really important that we get those people on board to bring others with them in terms of training and continual success.
Thank you.
Okay. That's super. Thanks.